Hello friends, today's topic is the cost of childcare. Let's rant.
When somebody tells you they can't afford to have children, this is what they're talking about. A woman in my town's Facebook group shared these daycare rates today, and she said, "How do you afford kids here? Because nobody knows how anybody is paying for this. For an infant for 5 days a week with 10 hours of care, it is $664 a week. That is just shy of $35,000 a year for one child. And the price does not drop that much when they hit pre-K here. It's $521 a week, which is about like $28,000 a year, okay? These are incredibly high rates for daycare. And of course, you could drop down to 9 hours a day or whatever it might be. But here's the thing. When you go to daycare, typically you're going to take the most hours because you have to commute to work, you have to commute back from work, and you have to work 8 hours a day. And unfortunately, when you miss pickup by 1 minute, they start charging you like $2 a minute. So usually it's more cost effective just to pay the higher rate for the 10 hours than to pay for the 9 hours, which is like crazy because it's 1 hour difference. These are rates for one kid. We were talking about one child. Imagine if a family has two kids. They're paying $50,000, $60,000 a year for childcare. That is unsustainable for most families. And yes, the cost goes down slightly as they get older. But what that doesn't account for, that rate sheet, is the annual increase. Every single September, daycare centers raise their tuitions because they have to. And typically that's anywhere between 5 to 20%. And most people are looking at 10% increase. So even though you have that savings when they hit pre-K, by the time your kid hits pre-K, it's been 4 or 5 years. That rate has gone up exponentially, okay? So when someone tells you they can't afford to have children, oftentimes it's because of the cost of childcare. And if it's not just the cost of childcare, it's the cost of housing and groceries, and you compound all those things, healthcare costs, it's incredibly expensive. I did not know, looking back 4 or 5 years ago when I first started having kids, that I would be paying this much money for daycare because the rates looked drastically different. The rates over the last 20 years or something have gone up like 200%. It is wild how expensive childcare is in our country. If we had affordable childcare, it would not only benefit families and children, it would benefit the economy, it would benefit businesses, and it would benefit us as a greater society. The economy would be better for it. This is not just a parent problem, right? But like people constantly are looking at adults who are married or of, birthing years and saying, "Why aren't you having kids?" And we're looking around saying, "How could we possibly have kids when we can't even afford to buy a house?"
How is people paying that? How much?
Hi, daycare employee here of 7 years, and most of my content on TikTok is about childcare. I currently live in North Carolina, but I moved from South Carolina. The parents in South Carolina were paying $180 a week, and I thought that was expensive. Then I moved here. And of course, cost of living, inflation. That was back in 2018 when I lived in South Carolina. So we can expect that things are going to be a little bit more expensive. But child, when I moved here to North Carolina and I got a job in childcare, when I found out the prices that these parents are paying weekly, that's the first question I asked, like, what do they do for work? And it got worse whenever I started actually working there and seeing how they live their daily life. Now, I won't out where I work at, but I will say that the prices for their daycare are on their website. So this is public knowledge. A parent of a full-time infant at my job is paying $360 a week for their child to attend my daycare. And let's do the math for fun. $360 a week, 4 weeks in a month, that is $1,440 times 12 months in a year, which is $17,280. A year, you're paying nearly $20,000 for your infant to attend daycare full time for the whole year. What do you do? And baby, that's for one child. Most of them have multiple children that go to the center. And here I am as a daycare employee, like, we barely make $20,000 a year. And the thing is, if they decide to keep their kids at a daycare for a day or two during the week, they're still paying that full-time price. So if you decide you don't want to be there, you're still going to pay. And these parents are just like, okay, we're going to be out for 2 days. It is what it is. Don't even bat an eye. They're on vacation. But that's what gets me. Because they're like on vacation 1 week, and then 6 months later, they're on another vacation. And then the cars that they drive are so nice. They're dressing to a T. Their kids are dressing to a T. They're gifting us things, teacher gifts. They got nannies. They're going to yoga in the morning time once they drop their kids off at daycare. And as a daycare employee, I'm not mad. But I do ask myself and my coworker every day, what the hell do these parents do? Where did they go to school? Did they just get lucky with their job? Like, I'm trying to figure it out because $20,000 a year, almost nearly $20,000 a year for one child, that's crazy that someone can afford that. On top of still living like a luxurious lifestyle or being able to afford like plenty other things. I just want to know, how are people doing it?
The cost of childcare is crazy and unsustainable. I understand why nannies are paid what they are, and while I understand daycare, I want my kids to be in the safest environment possible. I'm just saying, honestly, it's crazy. And I mean that from a ratio of income to childcare. I just got an email that my 4-year-old was accepted to a daycare that we applied in 2024. I don't mean 2024. We applied in 2020 for the daycare. So 4 years later, they finally have a spot because Charlotte, North Carolina is insane for daycares right now. They said, no problem. We just need a down payment and we need a month of the daycare, $2,400. I have 3 kids under 4. $2,400, and then they'd give a discount to my second for $2,200. If you add in my third, it's going to come to about $6,800 a month for daycare that's only from 9 to 2 a day. I'd have to be providing my own snacks and everything for the babies. $81,600. At that point, it's better for me not to work. What? I feel so defeated in this economy. $82,000. If I were to make a salary and then get the taxes, insurance, and everything off of it, it would be equivalent to about a $130,000 job. What are people doing? How are they surviving? I'm about ready to sell my feet pictures. Let me know.
I pay $60,000 a year for childcare. And that might seem insane to many people, but here in the US, childcare is not only inaccessible, meaning very hard to come by, but also unaffordable for so many. I am obviously in a place of privilege where I can afford this, and I see an upside to having my children in childcare. But the reality for most Americans, and especially American women, because we are the ones who are looking for and financing most childcare efforts, is that it's just out of reach. And so for some context, because I think people are always shocked by the numbers, for one infant to go to daycare at my child care center, which is a town-based recreation department child care center, it is $23,000 a year. That's for one child to go to daycare. That alone is staggering. That number is just so large, and so many people cannot afford that. And are there alternatives? Are there home daycares? Are there nannies? Are there nanny shares? Yes. But those are also pretty expensive and very, very hard to come by. My infant baby never even got to go to daycare. She is turning 1 this month, and they still do not have room for her. She will not be in childcare until she's almost 2 years old, because that is how long the wait lists are. The wait list can be 1-2 years, depending on where you live and the access that you have to childcare. Because since COVID, so many daycare centers and nannies have left the industry. Our childcare center is struggling to find and keep teachers because they are not paid enough, and there is no more government support to help them sustain in this economy. And I think so many people look to mothers often and say it's so selfish to continue your career and to put your kids into daycare, when in reality, our country, our economy needs childcare centers so that way we can function as a society, right? We need dual income homes, not just to be able to afford life, which is true, but also to keep our world going around. Our economy relies on all of these people working. And now people are leaving the workforce because they cannot find childcare. And this is hurting women. This is not hurting most men. This is hurting women more than anyone, and it's hurting our children. And often we also forget that women are the ones providing care in daycare centers and as nannies in all of those scenarios, it's almost always women. And so this problem, and the reason probably that it's ignored so much, is because it only impacts women and children. And it's crucial. I don't know how else to say it, but it is crucial that there is support here so that women and children can thrive in this economy, in this country, and just in general.
I want to point out this comment right here because it's absolutely correct. Some of the comments in that video are absolutely unhinged. You want to know one of the reasons? Did y'all know that private equity firms are investing heavily in child care centers, especially large chains of child care centers? Their goal is to consolidate smaller centers and increase their profit as much as they can. That is a huge growing concern in America, and it has been for years. And yes, there are still some mom and pop, privately owned daycares, but what do you think they're doing? They're following suit. They're like, oh, they're charging this over here, so I need to be charging this over here. When in reality, the actual workers that are at the daycare are not being paid as much as they charge. Does that make sense? The math is not math in there. That's what's upsetting. Okay, whether you want to look into this or not, in any no way, shape, or form was I dogging, shaming any daycare place. I love my daycare, but that's a lot of money, and it's a gut punch to anybody, whether it's a mortgage, rent, groceries. All the economy today is terrible. And I'm human for feeling like that's a lot of money. What if I said that about groceries? I'd have everybody in my comments like, oh, you're right, blah, 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 blah. But it just has to be a touchy subject. And most of the people that are mad about what I had to say are daycare workers, and that's okay. That's okay. But listen to me. Whether you want to admit it or not, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for a lot of people.
Bills, and more bills to many bills. The cost of everything is wild. How are you handling the cost of daycare? Comment down below, and thank you for watching.